West Virginia has so many legends attached to it. Most famous is the Mothman, but the Mountain State has so many other characters that they claim, like Bat Boy, the Flatwoods Monster, the Snallygaster, just to name a few. The state is rich in folklore, and that is no different for Screaming Jenny. Welcome to Ladies Fright. I'm your host, Joan. Screaming Jenny's tale takes place in America that's going through some growing pains. Transportation was changing to allow people and goods to be moved great distances without being drawn in a carriage. The Louisiana Purchase had doubled the size of the country's boundaries, and the question of what law would govern the land started to be debated. Would they be free or slave states? There was a lot of tension beginning to boil under the surface, and where there is tension, there is usually fear. Which leads me to wonder, is Screaming Jenny a true story about a woman's violent death turned into a reoccurring haunting? Or does her story come out of a community's fears of what is to come next? Jenny had fallen on hard times. At least that's how all the articles I found on her start. She seems to kind of pop into existence. She's never given a last name, and no attempts to connect her to a documented person are there. It is just said that she had fallen on hard times and had no family or partner to lean on. She was one of the people who had taken up residency in the abandoned storage sheds next to the new Baltimore and Ohio Railroad tracks in Harper's Ferry. The Baltimore and Ohio Railroad, which I will call B&O from here on out, was America's oldest railroad, with construction beginning on July 4th, 1828. And operation starting in 1830. The railway was developed as a way for settlers and goods to cross the Appalachian Mountains. A connection at Harper's Ferry with the Winchester and Potomac Railroad was opened in 1837, and a rail link between Maryland and Virginia was established in 1839 with the opening of Harper's Ferry Bridge. When the railroad was being constructed, sheds were built to hold materials, but once construction was finished, the sheds were abandoned and left standing. For the homeless community who were trying to escape the elements, these were seen as an easy form of shelter, and where we find Jenny staying. All accounts of her claim she was very kind. She was said to care for the sick and even go hungry some days in order to feed someone else. There's very little food to go around in this community. Jenny herself only had broth for a meal on that cold autumn night. Outside of her shed, she had made a small fire with the intention of warming herself and her broth. She was desperately hungry tonight and wanted the broth to warm her from the inside and to hopefully make this cold night a little more bearable. Once it was warmed enough, she began to drink, not noticing she was about to get a whole lot warmer when a spark from the fire landed on her skirts. In the early 1830s, the silhouette in fashion was a teeny waist leading to a large conical skirt made with stiff material and filled out with starched petticoats of cotton or linen. All of this to say, it was probably hard to see around these skirts. Now, someone who is struggling to feed themselves may not be wearing the latest fashions, but many dresses from the previous decade were cut up and remade following the new fashion, so we can pretty safely assume the materials were the same. I've seen some retellings say her skirt was made of wool, and wool is naturally flame resistant and takes a lot of oxygen to ignite, which would make the rest of the story hard to believe. However, it would be more plausible if she was wearing starched petticoats, since starch is highly flammable and can be even explosive in certain conditions. Either she didn't notice, distracted by her hunger, or it happened too quickly, but Jenny was soon engulfed in flames. In her first attempt to douse the flames, she dropped the remaining broth, but the little bit of liquid was overwhelmed by the fire. She ran towards what she thought was the direction of the train station and hoped someone could be there to help her, trying to get someone's attention, but also out of burning pain, she let out a blood-curdling scream. And she didn't stop. She kept screaming, and it filled the night with her tortured wails. Disoriented from pain and death from her own screams, Jenny stumbled onto the train tracks and was not aware of the locomotive bounding down them. The conductor did see Jenny, but was not sure what he was seeing. From his point of view, there was a large ball of fire on the path of the train. He tried to brake, but the momentum of the train was too much, and the screams stopped before the train did. When the train eventually halted, the crew got out to see Jenny's mangled remains still aflame. Without any family to claim her, the crew found a local churchyard and buried her in an unmarked grave. With no headstone to recount her time on Earth, Jenny seemed to be destined to be forgotten. That wasn't until a month later. On the B&O, another train came down the tracks when the conductor desperately tried to stop the train. Out of seemingly thin air, a person on fire appeared on the tracks, and even more alarming, he could hear the screaming over the roar of the train engine. When the train stopped and the conductor got out, he saw no one was there. Just as quickly as it had appeared, it had disappeared. The conductor reported what he had seen to the train master, who then recalled the story of the woman on the track a month prior. This is where she got the name Screaming Jenny. Now, every year on the anniversary of her death, Screaming Jenny is said to appear on the tracks, aflame and screaming. Oddly, even though this is supposed to be an annual event, no source I found gave me a date. An interesting thing I noted about Screaming Jenny's story is how consistent her tale is. As we've heard with other stories on this show, I usually have to talk about how one variation says this or that. Not with Jenny here. All the sources I've read said basically the same thing. Some would have a few extra details, but they all hit the same story beats. This may also be because there is no real concrete details to the story. We know roughly a date and time because of the railroad tracks just being built. However, we're not given an exact date. We are not given a last name for Jenny or a background story for her. We're hardly even given details about her life right before the incident. I'm surprised we even know her name is Jenny, based on the fact we're led to believe the station master is the one who named her ghost. Why would he know her name? To me, and no pun intended, it screamed that this was an urban legend. An urban legend is a form of modern folklore. It is a story that has been passed down verbally, and details tend to be vague or vary from region to region. In my professional, non-professional opinion, this was a very localized urban legend. Urban legends also tend to be a narrative way to explain a culture's fear. An example being many well-known American urban legends will have young couples going to a lover's lane and then something horrible happening to them. These tales serve as a warning to young people to not engage in sexual acts and alludes to America's purity culture. To understand what this story could possibly be explaining the fear of, we need to go through the details we do know. What we do know is Jenny was impoverished. From the story, it made it seem many people were living in these abandoned work sheds. This made me wonder if Harper's Ferry ever went through a time of poverty and Jenny's story was just an outlet for that fear. However, when I looked into it, Harper's Ferry is pretty well known for being an industrial town. Like with the railroad, the area is always trying to expand their business and commerce, and only saw a rise in poverty when an influx of newly freed people arrived after the Civil War. This story is very clear. It took place right after the railroad had finished in Harper's Ferry, which would be before the Civil War began. Then I wondered if I was too focused on the period and should think about the other character in the story, the train. As I said before, the B&O is America's oldest railroad and replaced the horse and cart for transportation. This major change brought along major concerns, and people came up with some interesting fears to have about taking the train. When steam locomotives started to gain traction, there was a belief that women should not be riding them. So let's take a guess why women shouldn't ride the train. Was it A, their skirts would create too much drag and slow the train down? B, women were their next of male kin's property, so they couldn't cross state lines. C, their uteruses would fly out of their bodies once the train reached over 50 miles per hour. Or D, seeing the outside world move so fast past them would make a woman go mad. Answer is C. Yeah. There was a moral panic believing that women's bodies were not designed to go at 50 miles per hour, and if a train exceeded those speeds, she would risk her uterus just flying right out of her. With the B&O having their first locomotive, Tom Thumb, introduced in 1830, Could Screaming Jenny just be a highly localized form of moral panic? We see panic happen with new advancements in technology even today. The greatest example being the fear of the possibilities of artificial intelligence. In 2021, I remember a lot of talk about deepfakes, or when AI is used to match a person's face, mannerisms, or voice. I felt a lot of fear in the idea that I may not be able to trust if the politicians I thought I was seeing on TV was actually not the politician and was some AI model of them. Now, I know this is a lot of my anxiety brain talking, but it's not completely unfounded. I have heard at least one podcast now train an AI on a person's voice to use and then have it read the person's text messages and social media posts aloud. I've even seen a YouTuber stumble across an AI dating chatbot trained on him, and he was surprised to hear how much the voice resembled his own. Now, in both these cases, AI is not perfect and still has that robotic cadence to it, but its flaws now are only what can be improved on in the future. We've seen urban legends already starting to form, like the case of Loab, or stories using it as a boogeyman, like with the computer game Kinetopet. With how little solid details we have about the Screaming Jenny story, it comes off more like an urban legend than a ghost story about the spirit of a real person. There was already a fear about women and trains and how fast they were going. This could possibly be interpreted as a warning about how trains are not able to stop easily. How even with a blatant signal, like a whole person on fire in the night, the train will still be unable to stop in time. In West Virginia, where we know they love a good story, why not have one to go along with this fear too? But what do I know? I'm just some lady talking about some frights. Thanks everyone for joining me. This is probably not the first episode to go up, but it is my first recorded episode. So I hope you enjoyed watching it more than I'm going to enjoy editing it, so we'll see how that goes. If you just cannot get enough of me, please join Ladies Fright on social medias like Instagram and TikTok and Blue Sky. You can find the links for all of those in the link tree in the channel's description. That being said, it would mean so much to me if you liked the video and if you could leave a comment, maybe telling me about a local urban legend in your area. I personally really love urban legends. I think it's so interesting to discuss cultural fears. Special thanks to my brother for helping me get this all set up here. I really appreciate that. Thanks. And yeah, all my sources will be down below in the description. And yeah, as I said, like, comment, subscribe, whatever you're supposed to do to help me out. Please help me out. Please help me out. And I'll catch you later. Bye.